if there's anything that makes me feel really cool, it's watching cartoons that no one else has ever heard of. So, one little preface before we begin. This is a bit of a departure from my usual content, and that's because that's something I've wanted to do actually for quite a long time now, to just expand my repertoire a bit. That's to say, expand on the kind of content I put out. Now, don't get too scared. I'm not going to suddenly start posting Minecraft videos or anything like that. I just live in constant fear of one day, like, running out of doll topics. I have a list of future topics that I keep and add to every now and then, and I've maintained this list for basically 2 years now. And right now there's like 60-ish, maybe 70 topics on it. But each time I have to remove one because I've used that topic, I feel like a physical sensation of anxiety that now I have one less future topic. And one day I'll look at that list and there will just be nothing left. And then I'll have to, I don't know, fake my death, get extensive plastic surgery, and start a new channel, I guess. So, to ease that anxiety, I thought it would be beneficial for me to just explore other topics every now and then. And the primary focus here will always be dolls. They are why I started this channel. It's how I built my audience here. It's the thing I love to talk about the most. That's never ever going to change. And the other things I explore will always be like, at least tangentially related to dolls. They're topics or media that I already know tend to have a lot of overlap with doll communities. So, on that note, today we're talking about something very near and dear to my heart: magical girls. And I know I have a lot of magical girl fans in my audience because I always get tons of comments pointing out my Kururun plushie there in the background. Specifically, magical girls that I think are unappreciated and deserve some more love and recognition. I am going to be primarily focusing on Western magical girls in this video, not for any other reason than that's just how it ended up going, and also because I do feel like for Japanese magical girls, even the most obscure, most unknown, most deep, dark abyss of the internet ones, they still tend to have pretty dedicated communities. Which obviously I have to say, I can only speak to my personal experiences and the circles I'm active in. Maybe in your corner of the internet, some of these aren't really that obscure or unknown, and that's fine. It just means that we are different human beings with different experiences and perspectives, and that's the beauty of living on planet Earth. And obviously this is not a comprehensive list. These are just 5 that I felt like talking about. I know there are more, and if there's a series here that I didn't mention that you want to share with me, I would absolutely love to hear about it, genuinely. But if you tell me that I forgot to talk about anything, you will lose your commenting privileges forever. And I will call the police, and you will be arrested forever. I'm sorry, that's just like such a big pet peeve of mine. Even if I did forget to mention something, don't tell me that. Just ignore it. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. Here are 5 magical girls that I think need to be talked about more, in no particular order. Number 1, Mysticons. Mysticons is a 2017 animated series that served as a collaboration between the companies Nelvana, Playmates Toys, and the Tops Company. It was created by Sean Jara and broadcasted on Nickelodeon. To give a very brief story synopsis, the show takes place in the magical world of Jamina and focuses on 4 teenage girls, Arcana, Zarya, Emerald, and Piper, who are given magical powers and become magical warriors known as Mysticons. If I had to describe the show, I would honestly describe it as a kind of an aesthetic fusion between Witch and Winx Club. Like Witch, it has kind of a dark fantasy vibe and a big emphasis on really fleshing out this magical world they've created. And like Winx Club, or at least the earlier seasons of Winx Club, it also has a lot of contemporary kind of urban fantasy elements. I hope that makes at least a little bit of sense. It's one of those shows that, like, writing it all down on paper and trying to explain it, it sounds like a lot. But once you watch it, everything just kind of falls into place and it all makes sense. It also borrows a lot of elements from Dungeons and Dragons. So the main group all have very archetypal races and classes. Arcana is a princess who is known as the Mysticon Dragon Mage. Zarya is another human who becomes Mysticon Ranger. The dwarf Emerald is Mysticon Knight. And the elf Piper is Mysticon Striker. And although I used Witch and Winx Club to describe the show, Mysticons is actually an extremely unique cartoon, especially for one that was aimed primarily at young girls. I can't really think of anything else quite like it, so I honestly have no idea why it wasn't more popular. Maybe it was just released at the wrong time, I'm not sure. I do feel like if it came out right now, it would be making some huge waves because it's like exactly what I see so many people looking for in a cartoon. Strong and diverse female leads? Check. An interesting magic system? Check. Excellent world building? Interesting villains? A great secondary cast with plenty of character development? Absolutely check. It is definitely a lot more of like a straightforward action show than it is a magical girls show. It has the transformation element, of course, and in my opinion, some really unique and interesting designs for their Mysticon forms. It has a really interesting backstory too. When Mysticons was first conceived by Sean, it was in development for about 4 years as a show featuring actually an all-male cast. It was an executive who asked Sean to change the cast to feature girls instead, a note that he admitted he wasn't initially very happy about. Something that helped him come around to the idea was thinking about his daughter and creating the kind of show she would like to see. The biggest internal change that Sean led was ensuring that the writing staff was primarily women, because he wanted to get the perspective from them of what they would have wanted to watch when they were younger. And when you watch the show, you really do get the impression that it was put together by people who absolutely loved what they were doing. There's another example of corporate meddling, this one not ending on such a good note. Mysticons was at one point planned to feature a kiss between two female characters, Zarya and her love interest in the show, another character named Kitty, which this happening in 2017 would have made it one of the earliest examples in cartoon history. And according to Sean, Nickelodeon was actually in full support of it, but it was a partner that asked them not to include it, so they were forced to cut the kiss during production. Fortunately, though, they were still able to keep the romance arc in the show for the most part. There are 40 episodes of Mysticons, split evenly between 2 seasons, which is by no means an unsubstantial number. But I can't say that it's a complete story, unfortunately. I do think they were counting on being renewed for more seasons, or maybe they were just too ambitious with how many plot threads they introduced and weren't able to follow up on, but still, absolutely check it out. The only real criticisms I have of the show are the aforementioned lost plot threads, and the animation is a bit limited and not entirely fit for action scenes, but otherwise, yeah, please, absolutely check it out. It's not just a really interesting, unique, magical girls show, but a really incredible cartoon altogether. Number 2, Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld. Am I stretching the definition of what constitutes a magical girl here a little bit? Yes, but Amethyst is from 1983, before a lot of the genre-defining franchises came about and the more common magical girl tropes developed, so I'm giving her some leniency. In any case, Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, is a DC Comics character credited to writers Dan Mishkin, Gary Cohn, and artist Ernie Colon. The character Amethyst would make her debut in the Legion of Superheroes number 298 in April 1983, and her solo series would begin the next month in May 1983. Amethyst was created originally for a 12-issue run that would target primarily female readers. I couldn't find an exact age range they were going for, but I would estimate the kind of typical comic book age demographic for the time, so anywhere from 13 to 17 with an appeal for adult readers too. Now, if you're familiar with DC Comics characters, as Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, etc., you know that they and all their comics exist in a shared universe. But in Amethyst's case, she was created as more of a standalone character who was only kind of related to the DC universe, which is actually not like a special case. DC was pretty experimental with their stories around this time. Anyways, the backstory of Amethyst is as follows. Amy receives a mysterious purple gem for her 13th birthday, and when she puts it on, she is transported to Gemworld. Time operates differently there, so she adopts the body of a woman in her early 20s and discovers that her birth parents were the rulers of Gemworld, but had been overthrown and killed by the evil Dark Opal. Amy herself was sent to Earth to protect her from Dark Opal, but now that she's returned, it's up to her to use her newfound powers to defeat him and restore peace to Gemworld, all while trying to maintain balance with her life back at home. Now, what I really love about Amethyst is how earnest it is. And normally when these companies, known for appealing primarily to young boys, try to put out something for girls, it ends up being kind of patronizing and stereotypical. And initially, that's what you would expect Amethyst to be, especially coming out in the early 80s and being a story about a young girl who discovers she's actually a princess, and she meets a dashing prince and rides a unicorn, and everyone is named after precious gems. But the thing is, despite these fairy tale elements, the comic really did not shy away from the kind of violence and heavy themes you would normally see in a comic from the 80s. The action scenes are pretty intense, and the story itself gets pretty dark at times. It's not gratuitous, but it does strike a good balance. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it respects its audience. It knows that just because a story has a female lead, it doesn't necessarily need to be softer or low stakes or more palatable. The 12-issue run proved to be such a success that DC decided to give Amethyst another chance, this time as an ongoing series. The original writing team stayed on the comic until around the 12th issue of the second series, where Mindy Newell took over, followed by the duo of Robert L. Fleming and Keith Giffen. Now, Mindy Newell is an amazing woman, super talented writer with an incredible history at DC Comics, but I'm not certain that she was the right person for this particular character, because Mindy, she has a reputation for creating stories that are incredibly dark and cynical and tend to veer on the edge of psychological horror. And that's kind of the direction she ended up taking Amethyst in. Things started to get a lot darker, and then they tried to incorporate Amethyst into the ongoing Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline, which, yeah, that's the whole thing, and unfortunately that ended up being more or less the end for this iteration of the character. I do personally prefer the original 12-issue run. I think it's a really nice, complete story with a lot of unique elements for its time. It's not that I think the later issues are bad, but the tonal shift is just a little jarring. I think the scales just tipped a little too far in one direction. But anyways, since then, DC has tried to incorporate Amethyst into their regular pantheon of characters to varying degrees of success. In 2012, she was featured in the revival of Sword and Sorcery, her portion written by the absolute legend and icon Christy Marks, who you should know as creator of Gem and the Holograms. Unfortunately, that run was very short-lived. In 2013, she was featured in a series of shorts produced for DC Nation that reimagined Amethyst as a young girl pulled into the world of a video game. The entire thing runs about 10 minutes or so, but it's cute. She was also featured as a main character in the 2019 Young Justice lineup with her own miniseries not long afterwards, and most recently, in 2021, DC released a graphic novel authored by Dean and Shannon Hale, who you may recognize as the author of several of the Ever After High books. This one is aimed at a much younger audience than her previous comic appearances, and I haven't checked it out yet, but it looks intriguing. I think Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, deserves more recognition for what it is. Not that I think a comic book aimed at girls is like an incredibly novel concept, but you have to keep in mind that this is a time that predates things like Sailor Moon or even She-Ra. A lot of media really struggled with not only capturing a female audience when it came to superhero media, but also creating female characters. But Amethyst did just that, and in a way that fully utilized its medium. And that's kind of groundbreaking when you think about it. Number 3, Star Darlings. Star Darlings is a 2015 media franchise from Disney, created by Shanna Muldoon Zappa and her husband Ahmet Zappa. It encompasses a book series, an animated series of shorts, and a line of fashion dolls. The series follows 12 girls, all corresponding to a sign of the zodiac, who live in a magical world called Starland. They attend an elite school called Starling Academy, where they train to become wish granters. How does this qualify them as magical girls, you may ask? Well, it's a bit like the series Angel's Friends, if you're familiar at all with that. It's a reverse magical girl situation. So they start out as magical beings, but when they travel to Earth, they transform into regular human girls in order to accomplish their mission. So, first off, I have to say, I really love the aesthetic of this series as a whole. Like, the character designs, stunning, absolutely gorgeous. Everyone looks so unique and has an incredible amount of personality. I also love that they incorporated the astrology element into it. I think that adds a really interesting layer, and was also pretty smart because it gives you a character to immediately identify with. I am in the midst of working on a big retrospective type video for this series, so I don't want to get too deep into the characters or the plot just yet. But if you're looking to get into this series, the books are absolutely the superior way to experience it. I remember watching the web series when it first came out, and they honestly kind of left a bad impression on me. They're just too short to properly show off the large cast, and honestly, a lot of them were just very strange or mean-spirited. The characters are way better written in the books. Each girl gets her own solo book, so you get to know everyone really well. And what I've read so far, I've really enjoyed. I think it's a really unique, really charming series with a great cast and a lot of really cool world building too. If you're into, really unique magic systems and in-depth descriptions of a magical world, then I absolutely urge you to check them out. Also, if you like dolls, they got them. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make every character. There is what's considered like a primary cast of 5 characters they mainly focused on outside of the books. So, Sage is the main character. Then there's Libby, Leona, Vega, and Scarlet. They did make some dolls of the other characters. Cassie and Piper got Wish World dolls, which were like their human forms. But unfortunately, the franchise as a whole was cut a little short before they could make more. But yeah, the dolls are super cute. I have a few and I really love them. They have very unique faces and are just so sparkly and pretty, and I really hope to get more of them someday. I know a book series is not like the ideal format to consume a Magical Girl series, but I guess a lot of this video is just me asking you to keep an open mind, because I really do wish more people had read them. I wish I had read them when they came out, because I feel like I honestly judged Star Darlings a little unfairly, basing it purely off the web series. It is a middle grade series, so obviously don't expect it to be like life-changing, but I assume if you're into magical girls, then you're probably already pretty accustomed to consuming content, meant for children, so it's really not like an insurmountable barrier. So if you want a cute, cozy series about a bunch of sparkly alien girls, all with their own unique personalities and backstories who help grant wishes through a fun magic system, well, here you go. Go check it out. And maybe buy a doll while you're at it. I don't know, it's a free country. Number 4, Sky Dancers. So we all know Sky Dancers, right? The cute little fairy-shaped death traps that grievously injured over 100 children and had to be recalled after a few years on the market. Well, a few years before the recall, Sky Dancers had a promotional animated series, one that I'm sure was incredibly enjoyable to watch through the eye patch you had to wear because your beloved toy just tried to assassinate you in cold blood. The Sky Dancers animated series came out the year I was born, 1996, and I don't actually remember how I discovered it a few years later, but I did, and I loved it. I loved it so much. Now, Sky Dancers is one of those things that I'm incredibly nostalgic for, but I also know on a practical level it is not objectively good. Even for the standards of 90s cartoons, it is not a great show, but it is still something that I think needs to be experienced, because it is absolutely an experience.
Angelica!
The cartoon centers around 5 students who all attend a dance academy led by Dame Skyla, who is, in reality, Queen Skyla, the Queen of the Wingdom, who gives her students the power to become sky dancers and defend her kingdom from the evil Sky Clone. What's cool about the show is that each of the main characters has a different background and a different dance style that they specialize in. Unfortunately, they don't really do anything incredibly interesting with that setup. Like, Breeze, he's Native American, and that influences his dancing, which is cool, but we don't get any information about his tribe or his family or anything like that. And also, the show constantly misuses dance terms and gets the names of moves completely wrong all the time. And I know I'm not making it look great for Sky Dancers here, but what I love about it is that it is so incredibly 90s in every good way and every bad way, and I love things that are just very dated. I love things that are such perfect encapsulations of the time period they're from, and that's exactly what Sky Dancers is. It is cheesy, it is corny, it is clumsy, subtlety is absolutely not in its vocabulary, but it is still an important part of magical girl history, in my opinion, anyway. And magical boy history, if you're into that, because 2 of the main characters are male. So, yeah, maybe Sky Dancers isn't, like, revolutionary or groundbreaking, and it didn't go on to inspire or change the genre at all, but I still think it should be talked about more, just because I think it would be fun to see what people say about it. Sky Dancers as a toy franchise already has such a fascinating history, and then you have this animated series on top of it, and it's just this big, beautiful mess that only a 90s franchise could be. It's definitely something that I think would be really fun to watch with a group of friends, alternating between like making fun of it, ripping it to shreds, and also having those small moments where you just appreciate it for what it is. Number 5, last but not least, Girls of Olympus. Or more properly known as Ragazze del Olimpo, but I know it's more practical for me to just say Girls of Olympus. Girls of Olympus is an Italian book series by author Elena Kedros. The first book was published in 2008, and 5 more would follow to complete the series. The plot follows 3 teenage girls who discover that they are the reincarnations of Athena, Aphrodite, and Artemis, and must use their powers to defend the world from Ares, the god of war. I wish I could talk more about the book series, but unfortunately, I can't. The books were translated to English at some point, but I guess just not released very widely because they're impossible to find. The way I found out about it was a trailer for the animated series, which was posted by the production company, the Animation Band, in 2011. And what I saw, I mean, it blew my mind. Like any self-respecting member of the LGBT community, I had a huge Greek mythology phase growing up. And here was one of my favorite genres, magical girl, combining with one of my big interests, Greek mythology. It was perfect. It was like it was made for me. So I waited for this series to be released. And waited. And waited. And I kept waiting. For 11 years. Over the years, the Animation Band would continue to release little snippets and trailers, but would just not release the full series. I'm not actually certain what happened or why it took so incredibly long, but Girls of Olympus did finally receive a full release last year on a streaming service exclusive to Italy. But the English dub was released a few months ago on the BBC streaming service exclusive to the UK. So you do need to jump through some hoops to watch it if you live outside of there. A VPN is your best bet. But if you have the means, I absolutely urge you to check it out. This series absolutely deserves more attention. It's really unfortunate that the hype for it just kind of died down in the literal decade it took to come out, and a lot of people just kind of forgot about it entirely. And I can't really blame them because it's not like the release was heavily advertised outside of Italy either. But the show itself is really cute. It's definitely a relic of the time where there was a bigger focus on quote-unquote girly cartoons. But the core of this series is definitely the 3 main characters and their personalities and their friendships. I really fell in love with all 3 of them, though I have to say Luce is definitely my favorite. She's especially iconic to me. The Greek mythology aspect is really interesting and, in my opinion, utilized really well. The girls' transformations and powers are all really cool. The villains are fun. And it does one of my favorite things that cartoons do. The characters actually wear different outfits across different episodes, so you get a lot of really varied, really cute looks for everyone. I can't say for sure if you'll have the same experience that I did watching it, because again, I waited literally over a decade for it, so it was just incredible in of itself to finally be able to watch it. But I do think it deserves to at least be checked out. You can tell a lot of love and a lot of heart went into making it, and it's unfortunate that it took so long for it to see the light of day. So I think that about covers it. 5 magical girl series that I thought deserved more love and attention. And now, it's your turn. Tell me if you were familiar with anything here on the list, if you were already a fan. Also, tell me if anything here was new to you, and if after watching you want to go check them out. And if you have a magical girl series that you think is obscure and underappreciated, absolutely drop it there in the comments too. Tell me all about it. And when you're done with all of that, just be sure to like and subscribe for any future fashion doll or fashion doll tangential content. Thank you.